especially since then, but it was already happening. The majority of rental apartments, residential rental apartments, are not in the hands of so-called mom and pop landlords or even middle-sized landlords. They are in the hands of big private equity corporations. Corporations like Goodman Real Estate that have corporations, properties in US and Canada. So if you look at the majority of the rental apartments, they are in the hands of these big corporations, and that's true in Seattle as well. The majority is owned by these massive corporations. But the reality is even murkier than that, even beyond that. If you look at the major shareholders, in other words, the major owners of these big corporations like Invitation and Avalon Bay, then you'll see, you know who? You'll see BlackRock, you'll see Vanguard, you'll see Geode Capital Investments, you'll see Norgus Bank. Company after company, go and look. It just takes a Google search. You look at who actually owns these real estate corporations. The corporations are big enough, then the real owners of these corporations are these trillion-dollar behemoths, these monsters from Wall Street. And I hope your listeners remember, when was the last time we heard about BlackRock? That was during East Palestine, Ohio, the rail disaster. And then before that, when the railroad strike the union strike was broken by the Biden administration. And on whose behalf was that done? It was done on behalf of Berkshire Hathaway, BlackRock, Vanguard. So that's how deeply rotten the ties are between the Democratic Party and the apps, the real power brokers in our society. And that's what the Democratic Party in Seattle did yesterday. By voting no, they have, in other words, further enabled these giant corporations.
And another council member, this was, let me get the name right, Herbold. She is talking about, more neoliberalism. Let's create incentives for owners of new buildings to participate, which just, this is, let's hand Amazon millions of dollars in free money to come to our cities. Corporate welfare is just more giveaways. So the answer to them, it seems, is more incentives, more subsidies for them to build somewhat affordable housing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, what's shameful about what Lisa Herbold did yesterday, also, unfortunately, is that she used to be with the tenants union. And so the question that ordinary people who are watching this should ask, what what does it mean when a self-described tenant advocate, a self-described progressive Democrat, does this sort of thing where they actually end up enabling the most destructive forces in our society, the richest people who have been stealing wages and the most basic needs that people need, ordinary people need. So if you have somebody who calls themselves progressive and somebody who calls themselves a tenants advocate do this, then it really begs the question of what kind of party we need. And it reminded me of and also others said this as well in the struggle here, that it reminded them of the MLK quote from one of his most important speeches, where he said that it's actually, obviously we understand who our actual enemies are. Trump today, Trump and the Trump agenda, the white populist agenda, are deeply have illusions about those people. But what's most insidious is these so-called progressives who then aid and abet these other forces. And that's where I think the most clarity is needed. And I think that's where yesterday's meeting was crucial. And what we built for rent control is crucial, which is to say that obviously the working class needs victories, and this was not a victory in that sense. It was, we didn't win rent control yesterday, but it was still extremely important for us to have waged this fight for a few reasons. One is that sometimes setbacks can also be teachers, and only if we draw those lessons, of course. It's not automatic. And so that's why a very important role that Socialist Alternative, my office, the activists and workers strike back have played is continuing to clarify those realities, that this is how rotten the Democratic Party is. And I think yesterday's meeting was a real confirmation of that. And that's where the other reason why we brought this to a vote also exists, is which is that um, the Democratic Party, and this is one of their strategies, they for example, if you look at what happened in US Congress, and what has happened in the last several years, it's not like they brought $15 an hour minimum wage for a vote and then it went down in defeat. It's not like they brought up Medicare for all and it then went down in defeat or it got watered down or whatever. Same thing you can say about student people have had, codifying Roe v. Wade. What stands out about the Democratic Party is that they try their level best not to bring any of these important things. Two-sided strategy where there's people on both sides of their mouth. They always have their contingency, so-called progressive, where people are continually channeled into the Democratic Party while ensuring that no substantive gains for the working class are won. And so that's been the story in relation to housing justice in Seattle and Washington State as well. So, for example, if you look at both city and state Democrats, they have loved talking about progressive revenues. I mean, they talk about progressive revenues all the time, and then they talk about uh, they don't necessarily talk about rent control, but they talk about lifting the ban on rent control. There's a statewide ban. It has been there for 42 years. Can you believe it? It's longer than many of your
Hello.
viewers have been alive, and the people who need rent control, that they have had many years. And so part of the task for Socialist Alternative yesterday was to actually force a Democrat to go on record winning, either voting yes or voting no. And from the beginning, we explained that look, we should not have rose tinted glasses. It is going to be extremely hard to win rent control. We have won a whole series of rent victories, but rent control is up there. And so we explained how this was going to be a question of a balance of forces. But if we can force the Democrats to take a vote on record, then we will have played a big role in exposing it.
And, at the end of the day, beyond just Seattle, all across America, people are kind of left with nowhere to go. You have Wall Street, a lot of the companies you talked about, buying up homes and then jacking up the rent. They put in modest improvements, and then you're seeing housing prices skyrocket, and kind of doing the same thing with rental properties, buying up rental properties, skyrocketing prices. I mean, pretty soon, if you can't afford a home, which a lot of new couples can't afford rent. We're not even just talking about the major cities. Prices are going up. More rural, they want. Inflation is cool to live.
Absolutely, it is really it's come to a point where even people who are like in Seattle, for example, even people who are making $80,000 a year, which is a really good salary that most people don't have access to, even they are unable to pay their rent in a sustainable way, meaning it has to be something less than 30%. So many people are paying 50% documented, are one financial emergency or one moderate rent increase away from becoming housing unstable, like from having to couch surf or moving in with their